Hello, everybody out there on the internet. I am your androgynous android game show host from the future, Nathan Blades, here to present to you the final episode in the Tabletop Mentorship Program Speaker Series for this season of 2021. On this show, if you are not already familiar, we invite fabulous and talented folks from the tabletop industry to share their insights and answer your questions, all in roughly 1 hour. This afternoon, we have our fantastic guest, an illustrator for a wide variety of different tabletop games and publications, Kwanchai Moriya. But before I welcome him to the show, I would like to say thank you to our sponsor of the show. Thank you so much to Jeff Engelstein and New Voices in Gaming. The New Voices Scholarship helps innovative and diverse people new to the tabletop gaming industry with funding for admission and travel to events like the Tabletop Network Conference. You can find out more about the New Voices in Gaming at newvoicesingaming.org. Because I gave that a little messily, I've also posted the link in the chat, doobly-doo. We also, the Tabletop Mentorship Program also has patrons. Patreon, would you like to be a patron? These fantastic people are patrons. Thank you so much to Eric Reese, Curtis Fry, and Angela Bell Soul for being part of the Tabletop Mentorship Program Patreon. And if you too would also like to be part of the Patreon and help fantastic things like this going, you can go to patreon.com/tabletop mentorship program, the link of which is also in the chat. Doobly-doo. Fantastic. Right. With our props and big ups out of the way, please, everybody give a warm welcome to Kwanchai. There we go. Hey. Hi, hello.
Hey, Nathan. Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. You would figure every time I do this, I would be able to do the smooth intros with no mistakes, but we still flip a little bit. Apologies. Because it's the last one, I suppose I'm nervous. I feel blessed that I've been able to meet such a wide range of people in the tabletop industry by kind of doing this gig. So thank you to you and everybody watching and listening for giving me the opportunity. But enough about me. Kwanchai, please tell us about yourself and all the fabulous things that you do.
Well, my name is Kwanchai. I am very excited to be here. I think mentorship is a very cool thing, and mentorship is a big part of why I'm here, because when I reached out to folks getting started as a freelance illustrator in tabletop, a lot of people were very helpful, both illustrators, publishers, just a lot of people took me under their wing, and I think it is in large part because of their kindness that I had the confidence to keep going with something like this. I think it's very cool, something I want to do more of.
Absolutely. Yes. And tell us the title of your presentation today.
The title is very boring, actually. I should come up with something cool. I try to come up with something cooler, but it's basically illustration and artwork in board games, in tabletop games. And what I'd like to encompass today is it's a little bit about myself and a couple bullet points, a couple pieces of advice in no particular order, and then just to answer questions. I feel like that'll be the most interesting part, just to get to the nuts and bolts. So.
Yes, indeed. On this show, we like to have a question and answer segment after the presentation. So please do keep your eyes peeled and open. And if you have any questions for Kwanchai at the end of the presentation, we will be answering them for you. But I am going to vanish off into the ether and let you have fun for the next 40 minutes. See you on the other side.
All right. All right. Thanks, Nathan. Here we go. So for anyone that's kind enough to be here, I have a janky presentation to zip through, but it's going to be, like I mentioned to you, a little bit about myself, and then five beginner points, beginner piece of advice, and then 2 intermediate or Illustrator 2.1 piece of advice, and then we'll take some questions. And throughout, I'm just going to sort of pepper the talk with images, like right now. Hopefully you can see on my screen and your screen. This is the top 15 things that I'm kind of known for as according to Board Game Geek in terms of images, and just to give myself some credit in case you don't know who I am. This is stuff I've done. Visually, it's very easy for an illustrator to show what they're about because it's literally visual. So here's a lot of the things that I've done, a lot of the board game covers, and I've done most of the interiors of these games as well. Okay, so let me pull up my little document here, and we'll kind of get into it. So my name is Kwanchai. I am 37 years old. I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, and I'm a freelance illustrator. At this point, I've illustrated I checked last night, about 90 games. Card games, expansions, board games, role-playing games, and for about as many different publishers. Not 90, but quite a bit. So I've done a lot of projects in the last 8 or 9 years. I think I started around 2011, 2010. And for most of those projects, I was the sole artist, doing the entirety of the thing. So cover, components, boards, etc. Besides board games, which is basically 99% of what I do, I also have a line of 5 nonfiction children's books. It's called the Head to Tail series. So it's like dinosaurs head to tail, bugs head to tail, which did pretty well, actually. And moreover, I just love being a freelance illustrator. It's a dream job. I pinch myself, not every day, but quite often. And I'm lucky to live here in sunny Southern California. But yeah, I got into tabletop illustration primarily because I love board games, and it was not a direct road by any means. I think, like a lot of artists, I started somewhere else and ended up with art. For me in particular, I got a history degree from University of California, Davis, with the aims to be a teacher, high school teacher, academia, something like that. And when I finished that degree, I had a year between things, and a friend showed me Carcassonne, Josiah. I call him the godfather of board games because he inducted me. And I was hooked. I was going to comic book shops trying to find, at that time, what was called German-style board games. So I'd call the comic shop and be like, do you have German-style board games? And half the time they'd be like, what are you talking about? And scouring thrift stores for old classics like Survive or Hero Quest, old vintage board games, has really got me into it. And what that did is it spurred me to get into a phase in my life where I was doing redesigns. So redesigns, for me, I did a game called Zombie Plague, which was a game that already existed. It was a print and play thing on Board Game Geek, and I put some new art on it. I did a redesign for Wiz War, a game that's very close to my heart. Ogre, Melee, Survive, a couple other things. And yeah, that was sort of where I got started with board games. So here's a couple images from that time. Here's a card game. This is Battle Line, and I made my own version of Battle Line. So just literally just card sleeves and a pen and drawing, and I was just doing my first layouts. Pretty simple stuff. Here's another couple cards from that first Battle Line set. You know, games were relatively hard to find back then. Basically, there was one game for every, there's one worker placement game, one area majority game. The deck builders hadn't even come around yet because Dominion hadn't been invented. So sometimes I couldn't get a game, and I just make the game so I could play it. Here's some more cards from that. Let's see what else I got here. Here's some of my redesign stuff. So this was Wiz War. This was the original game, and then I did some redesigns of that. This is a little later on. I redesigned a game called Hotel Life. I call it Motel Life, and did a whole bunch of illustrations for it. Here's a cover I did. I did a painting of Carcassonne, the actual place, and made a cover out of it, uploaded it to Board Game Geek. But you can see here, there's like a lot of passion. It's like janky. It's a little bit, early on, but I just really, really liked making things for board games. And Board Game Geek, the website, was a really, really important part of that passion, because there's a place where the community was small enough that there's about 4 or 5 guys and gals making stuff and sharing them and getting feedback. It was really exciting. But anyway, history degree, Carcassonne, got into board games. I had a year between things, and I had a friend, Young Nam, who was like, you should try to get into art school. Just try to get in. It's expensive, but like, just see if you can get in. And he helped me build up a portfolio, which was, it was a very scary thing because I always wanted to do art. I done a lot of art as a kid, but I'd given up on that because it seemed unrealistic. So here are some images from that portfolio that Young helped me build. A lot of pen and ink stuff. Here's a really funky looking Captain America, Superman. Here's a self-portrait. So simple stuff like, architectural, cross-hatching, that kind of thing, to try to get me into art school. And I did. I got into art school. I moved from the Bay Area down to Los Angeles to go to Art Center College of Design. And I completed an illustration degree in 2.5 years. And I was not a good student. I excelled at figure painting basically and nothing else. And I felt like there wasn't a single professor. There's like one professor that liked me. In fact, I felt in general that I was sort of just a mismatch. I was older than a lot of the other students. I wasn't as good as a lot of other students. Yeah, but I got in. And so I have a few examples of some of the artwork I was doing. Here's a big, giant, like 4-foot painting I did in art school. So you can see like my forte really is figurative oil paints, which is sort of specific and not necessarily limited, but it was just one thing. There's another painting I did of a friend. Let me see here, some more. After I graduated from Art Center, the only things I could get was gallery work. So we have here some of the paintings I was doing for a couple group shows in LA that I was very grateful to be a part of. But in general, I would say that after art school, it was mostly a slow, steady, crushing march to not failure, but it just felt like I wasn't doing what I wanted to do. I had applied to a lot of summer programs, internships, jobs, positions in entertainment studio companies, and I couldn't get them. There were a lot of other classmates that did get them because they were better than me. They are better than me. They were also in a program in art school that was more geared towards that. So they're working for studios at Netflix and Warner Brothers and Disney, but I couldn't get those jobs. And so it was a slow, crushing march from applying like junior illustrator positions, graphic designer positions, and eventually my inbox just had a longer and longer string of unanswered emails until the point where I was applying for like graphic designer at a banner shop, and I didn't even get an email back for that. So it was a very difficult time. I'd also gone to New York. That we were told if you're an illustrator, you go to New York, you send out a bunch of mailers, you go and cold call these big publishing houses on in downtown New York City, and I did that, and that also was unsuccessful. I sent out hundreds of mailers. I created these little dinosaur cards. I'll show you them. These little dinosaur cards to send out to folks. So I was trying to be creative. I did these cutout images of dinosaurs, made them into little packets, sent them out with my business card and a mailer to try and get work from any publisher I could, especially children's book publishers. But I sent out hundreds of them and I didn't get any response. So it's a very difficult time. And I feel like the story that really captures that time the best is I got a listing for a job. It was called photo archiver position. And I screenshotted the email just because, why not? Let me see if it's here. But essentially, here it is. Photo archiver position, Kwanchai Moriya. Hi, Victoria. My name is Kwanchai Moriya, blah, 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 blah. There was a position for a photo archiver for the Yul Brynner photo collection. I think Victoria herself was the daughter or granddaughter of Yul Brynner. And I was trying to apply for a job to basically scan photos of this famous person, Yul Brynner. And I couldn't get anything else, and I was desperate to just I actually went into her office and sat down And I remember saying, I can start anytime, and I have experience in flatbed scanners because at art school, that's what we use, giant flatbed scanners. And I remember leaving that interview and just feeling just completely dejected because it was a lot of people had invested in me to get to the point where I was. And here I was a year, 2 years out of art school, and I just could not get anything remotely related to what I wanted to do. And again, the bright spot was these gallery shows with Giant Robot in LA, but it was in no way sustainable. And I had to sell a painting that I really wanted to keep just to make rent in this like pool house I was renting from this lady, just, you know, like that I was living in. And yeah, it was a very hard time in my life for a lot of reasons. And I felt like I had nothing going for me. And it was a very anxious time. I'm also the oldest son in a very Asian family. So if you know what that's like, or know when you have any friends like that, that's a very interesting yoke to bear. And so after this photo archiver position, I found myself in 2012 working at an after-school tutoring center for kids, a very mediocre one. There's a lot of them around here in Southern California. And I was hired for an art tutor position, but my boss basically had me do math and reading workbooks with the kids. So I'd get in my car, I'd slap a big magnetic sticker on the side with the name of the tutoring center, drive to the elementary school, pick up some second graders, bring them back to the tutoring center, and basically go through workbooks with them. And that was my job. And there's nothing wrong with that job. It just had nothing to do with the thousands of dollars I'd spent to go to Art Center and to try and be this freelance illustrator. So very difficult. But the thing that I was doing constantly, even while I was working at this tutoring center, was I was doing personal projects and doing redesigns on Board Game Geek. I was still posting stuff on Board Game Geek. And in all that time, after going to art school and spending the money and doing the 2.5 years, I got a message through Board Game Geek because the publisher of Catacombs had seen my redesign of Catacombs. So I will show you that. That is here. So Catacombs, if you don't know, is a disc flicking game. It came out in 2010. And this was all it was. This redesign was literally just these stickers, because they're sticker discs. And I made my own set of stickers. I uploaded them to Board Game Geek on the Catacombs page. And about a year later, I got an email from Aaron with this company, and he's like, would you be interested in doing the redesign for the whole game for the new edition of Catacombs? And I just couldn't believe it. It was crazy. And also in that year, I gotten a call back from a company, a book publisher in Canada called Kids Can Press, to do, they'd seen my dinosaur cutout mailer and they called me and they said, can we talk? And they wanted to hire me to do a dinosaur cutout book, a nonfiction cutout book, which turned out to be the Heads to Tail series. So they'd seen this and then hired me to do a book just of that. And I rolled over and just cried because I couldn't believe that someone wanted to work with me and wanted to have me as an illustrator. So that was a big breakthrough that year, but I had basically given up. You know, I did Catacombs, was my only project in 2012, I believe. And, you know, it paid okay, but really it paid what I would pay myself at that level where I was at the time. But I got good press from that. And so I took that portfolio, which had a bunch of schoolwork and some gallery work, and I took it to Gen Con, Origins, and Essen Spiel of that year to try and drum up more work for with board game publishers. So here's a picture of me at, I think this is Origins, with Aaron, the publisher of Catacombs, main guy. Super excited. This is, you know, here we are with Catacombs all laid out. I helped run the booth. I had a backstage pass to, you know, be part of the crew and run it. Here's a picture of me and my then girlfriend, now wife, at Essen with a couple of my early games. Here is another picture at Essen that year. This is the cover of Catacombs and some of the characters. So some characters from the game here, some villains from the game. Here we go. And yeah, the main thing I want to say is that it was those passion projects early on, those redesigns that were more important to my career, to my eventual career than art school or than anything else was. And so I can't say that art school wasn't important. It was. And that's a whole different discussion, whether to go to art school or not. But it was doing redesigns and uploading them to Board Game Geek that gave me the career that I have now, and all the folks that were, game enough to roll the dice on me as an early illustrator. So I went back. This is not the exact portfolio, but this is essentially the portfolio that I took around to publishers at those conventions. And I did this for about 2 or 3 years straight, going to every convention I could and hitting up every single booth that I thought would be relevant to my career and trying to get work. And in the last 9 years, I usually at any given point have been on 5 to 7 projects at a time, some small, some very small, some very large, and going to conventions, keeping up my contacts, trying to meet more clients. And some watermarks for me in my career have been 2019 Gen Con. I walked into the main hall. I had about 10 or so games coming out that season. And almost every aisle I walked down in that main hall had a giant banner of a different piece of art of mine, just hanging from the ceiling or on the side of the booth. So like here, I'll show you some pictures. Actually, I'll save that. But yeah, that was a very good year. And I did 3 signings where the publisher had me come to the booth, announced it to people, and people brought their board games up, and I got to sign boxes. And some folks came up to me who I'd never met before, asking if I was Kwanchai Moriya, and just to shake my hand. And that blew me away, because you really had to be a serious alpha gamer, board gamer fan to know who an artist is on a project. And it was very, very flattering and a big ego boost for me. Also last year, the Head to Tail series, which is my that nonfiction series, was in McDonald's Canada, was opted to be a part of their Happy Meal series. So for a limited time, for the last 2 years, you could get a Head to Tail series book in your Happy Meal. This year, it's going to be Bugs Head to Tail, or I forget, Birds Fed, one of them. But that was something that I could just tell my mom, like, Mom, go to McDonald's in Canada. She's not in Canada, but it was something that was very tangibly like a big hooray for me as an illustrator. So what's the point of telling you about myself? I don't want to sound, it makes me sound kind of like a hero, but honestly, a lot of these dots only connect looking backwards. So, here I am in Essen years ago, and I couldn't have known that where I am now would connect to this place with that, dopey smile of mine, just doing my best, hustling around with my portfolio. But it's important to know that art is hard and that many, many talented artists give up on trying to do art for many, many very good logical reasons. I had basically given up. The dots connect looking backwards, but moving forward, it's such a tenuous path. And it's one that I have a hard time recommending or giving advice about, because it's going to be so different from person to person. And the only thing that is the same is that you have to be dogged, flexible, creative, and full of passion to do something like tabletop illustration. It didn't even exist when I was getting out of art school. I said I'm a gallery. I told people, well, I'm doing paintings for galleries and I do some board game art. But now I'm 100% a tabletop illustrator, and there's a dozen other folks who I've met over the years, Ian, Beth, Jackie, all these guys who are doing the same thing, which is crazy. So I want to tell you a little bit about myself, because I feel like it's important to understand I think I'm a little bit of a edge case, but you do have to eat a lot of failure, and a lot of embarrassment. Honestly, it's awkward. It's strange to have to hustle and promote yourself, but it's also it's a warning, but it's also a calling, because gosh darn it, that is like, if you're the certain type of person who thrives on adversity and a challenge, it can really motivate you to get somewhere, because it's challenging and because it's through the weeds. So, and I also hope that my story, although it is a little bit dramatic and sad about, not getting art, that's a lot of people's stories, and a lot of them don't end up with a nice happy ending. But I hope it also equalizes the space that we're here talking today. I'm talking hopefully to some people who are aspiring artists, other people who are aspiring to do something in the board game space. And I just want to say to anybody that I am not far from you, and you are not far from me. Trust me, it's true. I have a good amount of other friends, tabletop illustrating friends that I can call colleagues, and many of them have achieved success because of passion and doggedness at their craft after their day job. So they're doing something else, and they might not love it, but they go home and they create and they make things, and might end up with, walking through a main hall at a convention center and being wowed by the accolades. So the important takeaway is passion is important. And at this point in my experience in this industry, it's a lot of people that are, it's an industry full of people who are passionate. A lot of CEOs and owners of companies are still people who love to play board games. And if you have that magnetism as an illustrator or whatever for board games, and you love tabletop games, then there is a connection there that I don't know is necessarily in other industries that might be have been around longer. So that's kind of my background story. I'm a optimist at heart, and I'm prone to romanticizing things. So I think it's important to start with pragmatism before we launch into a lot of loftier sort of bits of advice. I'd like to show you a couple more images. This is Dinosaur Island. It was one of the early gigs, excuse me, that I got from going to that first year at Gen Con Game Fair. It was one of the first things I got, and Nathan and Molly allowed me to. I've worked with them 4, 5, 6 more times, I think, and it's been a really great relationship. Here's one of the other books, Ocean Animals Head to Tail. This is like a cutout illustration type. This is the children's book series I mentioned. Just for the heck of it, here's some gallery work from when I was doing gallery paintings. This does come into play later in my board game career when I try to mash this style of art into some of the projects I was working on. So here are some of the images from that. A lot of kind of superhero sci-fi looking stuff. There's another one. Here's a fancy GIF of some of my process. You can see some of the paint getting laid in. And here's another one. So if you are here for any little bits of advice, I'm going to talk about them now. So get your pens ready, and we will talk about that. Oh, I have a couple more pictures, actually. So here are some of the images from kind of mid-career. I had gotten this very awesome gig, The Game. You might see this at Target. It's been selling well for a long time. A little card game I did with Pandasaurus. Here's some of the sketches I did for that game. That concept was completely open concept, and they were just right. The publisher told me, what do you want to do? And I came up with the idea that each set of 10 cards would be an era in the history of the Earth. So that was this top concept here, which turned into the eventual game itself. But you can see we had a bunch of different styles here, and it's an abstract game. So here is a game called Goris Maximus that I did with, oh my gosh, I forgot the name. Canadian publisher, great guy. I cannot remember his name. I'm sorry. Goris Maximus, and here are some gladiators from that go. Oh, Inside Up Games. Sorry, that's Inside Up Games. Fun trick-taking game. I did a game with Haba, a kids game, which was a really cool to finally get an image with that yellow box on there. It was a dream of mine. Here's some interiors from that game. A giant project I did was a Overlight RPG, which you may have heard of. Almost 80 paintings I did for that game. So here's the cover. Some of the interior splash pages with paintings. So here I was able to take some of my gallery work that I was doing here in LA and use them in an actual game, which was very, very exciting and very cool. Capital Lux is another game I did, which is using that again with that painting style. That's the cover for Capital Lux. Here's the original painting, which I still have hanging in my hallway here. It's of a friend of ours. Some more Capital Lux illustrations. And let's do one more. Let's do Flip Ships. That was another game I did with Renegade. Really fun, cool concept. And Kane Klenko is a very cool designer who invited me onto that project. All right, and then here's some stuff that I'm doing recently, and then we'll go into some advice. I think I'm okay on time still. Here is Bosk, a game I did for Floodgate Games. I love hiking, and so I just poured that into this one here. Recently, I did a cover and interiors for a game called Gravwell, 2nd edition. So here's that cover and the raw art there. Also from the last 2 years, Pret-a-Porter, a fashion game by Portal Games. And then, here's another one. High Rise. Here's the raw art for High Rise, a city building game I did with Gil. And most recently, the one that hit my table most recently is a game called Kabuto Sumo by Tony Miller, which it just looks great. I love how it came out, and here's some characters from that game. Okay, let's get to some bits of advice. If I can kind of see the chat here, so if you have anything, just hit it up in the chat, and I'll try and get to it. If you see something or have a question, of course we'll have questions at the end, but I'm going to quickly run through some of this beginner advice. It's 5 points of beginner advice and 2 points of intermediate advice, but I feel like all of it is relevant, and they're in no particular order. So let's begin. First bit of advice: if you are interested in being a tabletop illustrator in this business, is make a plan, make a long-term plan. 2 years, 5 years, whatever it might be, make a plan, because nothing is going to fall into your lap. I don't know why, but a lot of us after art school, especially me, just felt like maybe things might happen, something might shake loose, someone might have seen something I did online or at my graduation show, and I just need to wait because someone will realize that I'm really good at this thing. But no one is looking out for you. So you need to look out for yourself and always be moving and shaking and making a plan for your career. So here's a picture of me. This is me at that after school program. Those are sodas, not giving alcohol to young children. But you know, I would be happy to still working that job. Honestly, like it's not that working any job is bad, but it's important that whatever plan you have allows you to keep a focus and an eye on the prize, which ideally is being an illustrator or being a freelance illustrator. And I've worked a lot of jobs. A lot of different jobs, and it's important that whatever that job is allows you to have time after to try and do the thing that you actually want to do. And luckily, the owner of this after school program, he had worked on like the Ren and Stimpy show, some stuff for Nickelodeon a really long time ago, doing cell coloring, I think, and he just had a little bit of sympathy for me and made sure that he scheduled me in hours that let me get off and try and work at night. He didn't know that I didn't really have any work at night, but I mean, just, you know, that was important that, that you make a plan, because I did not have a plan. So that's my advice. Have a plan. And that plan needs to involve some kind of work. It might be a job that's related. It might not. And that plan also needs to have a moment in there where when you are ready, you jump in with both feet, meaning you cut and run and do the thing you actually want to do. So at one point, after getting Catacombs and getting my first few gigs, I realized I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to go to these conventions. I'm going to spend the money on tickets, on getting a booth or whatever to try and get more work. And that was really important because at one point I just had to cut the baggage and just run with the thing I really wanted to do. And my girlfriend at the time, my now wife, she helped me punch out like hundreds of these cards. I'll show you what it looks like. So this is, I kept one card. So when I went to my first Gen Con, and some publishers still have this, they remember that I gave them to them. So I made these little cards with it's just two pieces of cardboard with a cutout, and inside was some of my images and my business card here. So I would go up to publishers and show them my portfolio and then say, thank you. Here's a little booklet with my card and some stuff. Thank you for taking the time. And we made hundreds of these, and like using cheap little hole punchers that broke after like 50 punches. And, that's what we did. Like, that was the plan. Like, just stop at one point, stop doing the side job and just go with the main plan. So it's important. First piece of advice, make a long-term plan, make milestones that are realistic and exciting, and tell your friends and your loved ones about it so you can be accountable. So that's the first piece. Second piece of advice is related to the first one. It is go to where the warm bodies are. And what I mean by that, go to where the warm bodies are, is go to places where business and people in that industry are meeting up and doing stuff, doing business, signing deals. Go to where professionals doing what you are doing are meeting up, and there's always a place for that. That's conventions, summer programs, atelier programs, internships. There's a lot of them. Like in board games, that's easy because it's board game conventions. For my children's books, there's summer programs and winter programs where illustrators and authors meet up, and honestly, a lot of business is done or handshakes are done on those convention floors. So it's important to do that because, that guy that's impossible to reach, the owner of that company or that art director who you will not email you back. If you go to a convention, there he is standing there bored on his phone, trying to ignore you, awkwardly glancing at him, trying to get his attention. He's right there. So what I did was a lot of these conventions, my wife went with me, and she would hold my backpack as I looked down at my portfolio. And as soon as there was a moment, I would walk over to the booth and talk to the guy, come back shaking because I was just so nervous. And I hate promoting myself, try and get more work. And I still have most of the business cards that I got from, this is like one season of business cards, with just everyone's contact information I could ever get. Here is I found this in a box. This is a list of every booth that I wanted to go to at Gen Con, I think. So it's like, it says here like Space Cowboy, Stronghold Games, Pretzel Games, Formal Ferret Games. It's funny because a lot of these guys I've not done work with, but at the time it was like a pipe dream. And I'd cross off a name every time I hit up. And I hit up, basically, I spent the majority of my time at these conventions going from booth to booth. So go to where the warm bodies are. 1 hour, I read a thing that said 1 hour of physical networking is worth more than 100 hours of virtual networking. I don't know where that statistic is from, but I would say it's even more than that. 1 hour of physical networking is just way more valuable than hours spent emailing, posting things, trying to get likes and hits. And also, in relation to going to where the warm bodies are, do not listen to the wrong people. I've seen a lot of artists get a lot of really good advice from publishers, art directors, whatever, only to then go and listen to the one dissenting voice of another artist who says people don't want that kind of work, or that medium doesn't work, or that work isn't right. And they listen to this one, like an aspiring artist might listen to this one dissenting voice because it confirms their fears and allows them to not get up from the couch. So be careful what you listen to, who you listen to, and going to where people are congregating and gathering and doing these things is a really good way to give yourself a big leg up from other people doing what you want to do. Okay, point number 3 of 5, make really good box covers, make killer box covers. And what I mean by that is essentially being really good at composition and value. In board games are supposed to tell a story. They're supposed to evoke a theme, a feeling, and real board game enthusiasts appreciate every inch of that box and what's in it. So understanding that as a tabletop illustrator, you're illustrating this box with this whole world inside of it, you have to be really good at making that box cover really sing. Also, if you want to get really consistent work, if you make a really good box cover, you will get more calls back than if you were really good at doing some cards or some layouts and stuff. And the problem I see here is that some artists come from other industries and bring in some of the things they've learned from. So it might be like turnarounds, which in animation are character studies, or it might be like someone coming from apps or digital stuff, and it might be you need floating assets. So it's like a character on a gray background. So one thing I see a lot at conventions and people's portfolios when they show me is what I call dwarf holding axe floating on gray background. I've seen so many great like characters just floating on a gray background holding a weapon. And although if that thing is really good, sure, that's great. I mean, dwarves are in a lot of games, but what's a lot better to be good at is a box cover that has a mood, that tells a story, that is dynamic. And the way you do that is to have really good composition on a box cover with really good sense of value and contrast. It's got to pop off that shelf because the publisher wants to sell things, and it can't just be something ephemeral or something, you know, a really good character. It's got to be something that's composed well. So really good box covers is my third point. And if anyone has any more questions specifically about these things, just let me know. The fourth point is design with your client in mind. So design with your intended client in mind. In this case, it's tabletop games. And it's important to understand that you're making a board game and not a poster or a book cover. And the more you know about your client and the kind of games they're putting out that season, do they have another board game on there in that season that has an all-white cover? Then you know not to pitch them an all-white cover because they're not going to do 2 all-white covers. Show them board game art if you're trying to get a pitch. Show them how your art works in a board game. They don't want to see, which I did, they don't want to see a portfolio that's half full of art school homework, which is, you know, just cut that out. Like, make new work, make pretend board games. That's what I did, basically. And you need to show them how your work specifically makes their products more awesome. Not in theory, but literally, how does your work fit into their board games as a client? That's really, really important. So design with your intended client in mind. And the last bit of beginner advice is use reference. So here is a funny picture. Oops. So yeah, this is a game called In the Hall of the Mountain King. And it was a challenge to me to do a cover. It's always a challenge for me to do a cover that doesn't have people in it because I'm really good at drawing people, but I lean too hard on that. So I was trying to do trolls, of course, in this game. And I don't usually do this, but if you have small children in the room, you might want to leave. This is my reference for that cover. This is me. I mean, things are, you know, I photoshopped them, so I'm not actually that wide, and my head's not actually that small, but it's a good example of always, always, always use reference. So reference will make your work better. And this particular reference teaches us 2 things. One, good reference can really help. And secondly, humility in all things, because wow, that is a very special bit of reference. But that reference allowed me to do this cover. And here are some of my sketches from that game. But reference always makes your work better, and you need to do the research as an artist. Read, research, study other artists in that field, study other covers that are being done in that theme, and really nail it. Because people can really tell if you don't use reference. Even just average people, not artists at all, they can tell when a head is wrong, when hands are wrong, when feet are wrong. So don't skimp out there. If you can draw people really well, really well, you're ahead of like 90%, 99% of other artists. If you can nail the human figure really well, because people can always tell when figures on a cover look wrong. There's actually a 6th point here for beginner advice, and that is make things that you love. So no matter whatever you're doing, you need to infuse passion into what you're doing. And so always make something that you step back from and you're just like, oh my God, that's really cool. Really cool. So make things that you love. So those are my 5-6 bits of beginner advice. I have a couple pictures to show. Let me see here. So in terms of go to warm bodies, here is my wife at one of the conventions. She's gone to a lot of stuff with me, and she's been a real great source of support. Here's me at the first Shut Up and Sit Down convention with the guys. Here's me with Molly and Nathan. You can see Dinosaur Island in the background here. It's a very cool moment. Here's cool. This is cool. One of the entryways to Gen Con, they had giant vinyl wraps of my paintings on one of the doors. Here's me and Ryan with IDW Games with a big blow up of Tonaria game I did about fishing. And another one here, High Rise, with there's Gil. So some stuff from the things. Here's a good example. So when I talk about making killer box cover, this was my first Dinosaur Island cover. Honestly, this was really early on in my career, and it's a good cover, but I wouldn't do it the same way if I did it now. But I had the chance to do 2 more games in that series, and so here is Dinosaur Island Totally Liquid. I can already tell I'm getting better. You know, I'm applying things I've learned and trying to make a better, cooler looking, more cohesive cover. And then here is the cover for Dinosaur World, which I did last year, and I feel like it got even better. So you can see the progression, the growth of it. Trying to make a really good box cover is important. Okay, and then finally, the last 2 bits of advice for intermediate folks. Maybe you're already sort of got a leg into illustration and you are a little bit on your way. I would say the first bit of advice for intermediate folks is be a really good coworker. And essentially what that means in this industry is being good at emails. Know your client. Who's their boss? What products are they putting out this year? What are budgets like on average for a company of this size? I've made a lot of mistakes. Most of them don't have anything to do with art. They're mostly to do with like the business side and being a coworker, invoicing improperly, or but that's solved with communication. So at this point in my career, I choose projects mostly based on, do I want to work with these people? Do I want to work with that art director? Because that's essentially your coworker for the next month or 2. And they are doing that on a daily basis, choosing people that they want to work with. So be a good coworker, be kind, be on time if you can, and put out as high quality of a product as you can every single time. That's my first bit of advanced advice. My second bit of advanced advice is don't forget about the rest of your life. And that's something I'm working on still, but being a great artist is not everything. Most of my classmates and the folks I know in art, most of the classmates I went to school with, a lot of them are not doing art because it's very hard to be successful, and there's a lot of burnout rate. It involves a lot of luck. You have to hustle. You have to stick around for a lot of rolling the dice, and a lot of people that are much better artists than me couldn't cut it in the real world and I don't mean to denigrate them at all, but it's difficult, and there is a lot of luck. There's a lot of better artists than me. So you have to be both really good at being an artist, but also be good at everything else in life. And that involves being a good businessman, running a small business essentially, but also taking time to experience the world around you, still keep doing those personal projects, and getting out and doing other things, seeing people, right? Because the art that comes out of you, oftentimes I've found, is based on something that I just did that had nothing to do with art, a book I read, a movie I saw. So my second piece of intermediate advice is definitely take the time to do other things. Leave the studio, experience new things, travel, see people, enjoy other hobbies. It so often translates directly into really, really good work. So I was painting miniatures a few months ago. Here's some Gaslands miniatures. It is art, I guess, but it's also just tactile and fun and completely different. I also do woodworking in my garage. So I made a Minnie Mouse chair for my friend's daughter. Here's that chair. Just get out, let your eyes relax, and do other things. I go backpacking. It's important to not forget about the rest of your life and find some work-life balance. And that's pretty much it for my bits of advice and my long spiel. I went a little longer than I wanted to, but essentially, those are my bits of advice. And I see some questions here, and Nathan's back, so I will let him take over.
I mean, I was enraptured to the entire time. It was great. That was really, really good to kind of learn about that process. And it's always interesting. It's like, oh, yes, I've seen that box art before and went, man, that looks cool. I wonder who made that. And now I know. Overlight in particular was kind of, because my realm is in tabletop RPGs a lot.
Very fun.
Going back through the chat, because we had a bunch of amazing questions. Sometimes I have to seed the question pool a little bit. Everybody's been really, really keen. Liquor Sylph says, as a tabletop illustrator, do you see any residuals from your prior work?
I see residuals from my children's books, which is not board games, because that industry is built around that system. So you have royalties built in. You get a upfront payment against your possible earnings. And that's how most royalties work. And then you get a percentage of wholesale sales of that book or whatever. But in board games, I think I had one instance where I did a royalty system. And that was with a client that couldn't meet my upfront price. And so I said, hey, let's do this lower upfront price, and then that game didn't quite do well. So, and I wasn't expecting it to, but it allowed me to lower my price and work with a client I wanted to work with. But in general, I only know of one of a 20 or so illustrators who strictly works on a royalty system. Everyone else works on a quote on a whole big ticket price, gets paid half up front and half at the end.
Indeed. Birdie Blake says, do you think it's harder to get into the illustration industry when you're older, i.e. not fresh out of college?
So I was 28 when I got Catacombs, and I felt so old. I went to art school with a bunch of people who were just out of high school. So a lot of them were 19, 18, 20, and I felt like an old man. I in general, I veered towards old manishness, but in art, I felt very old, and I felt genuinely embarrassed to be where I was at my age, with no milestones to quite name at that time. But I do find that a lot of people, especially in tabletop, are coming from all sorts of other backgrounds to tabletop, and are grateful no matter at what age or at what stage they're at to be in tabletop at that point. And I think a lot of jobs and whatever they were doing, although it would have been cooler to be a part of it earlier, it's a lot of that life experience is important to what they were doing. Like I remember one of my first conventions, I just chatting with Kyle Farron, who's the illustrator of Root and Oath and all these leader games, and I was at that convention with him and Patrick, and Patrick's the owner of Leader Games, and it was it was their first big thing. It was also my first big year at a Gen Con, and he was telling me that he was working as a graphic designer for a print shop or something. Like it was like, and then doing these amazing illustrations on the side. Eventually he got hired full time to do these. Like he's one of the best illustrators in the business, but you know, at that point he already had a family, a lot of young kids and a wife. And I feel like for me, no matter the age you might be at, there's always a life of normalcy to revert back to, and there's no harm in jumping now.
I mean, we're endlessly learning, growing, and learning new skills. So, you know.
Indeed.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for the question, Birdie.
Yes.
Adrian Pillai says, how did you make that first convention hit list? Which, now that's reading that aloud now, makes it sound like you were going to kill all those people and take their place. Did you rank them according to how much you liked their products?
I tried to. I knew at that time there was a couple companies doing a lot of art forward games. And a lot of companies doing just whatever game. I mean, I attribute some of my success to being a mediocre artist at the time in a very small pond that were still doing European style, dry, you know, English Tudor King on a box with a drab castle in the background. As a lot of the games were still that. Now we have amazing art. I mean, in general, companies start with art. Like they know it's important, but back then it was like there was still somebody's cousin still doing, you know, because they were in art school. That was kind of the mood of the moment. So I tried to hit up art forward publishers first, but then I just literally ripped out the sheet in the program guide with all the booths, and then just circled all the ones that were board game publishers. And even went to other people. Like I even went to miniatures manufacturers. Like I just anything I could go to. And that surprisingly, like I found work in nooks and crannies you wouldn't think of. Like I went to a miniatures manufacturer. It turns out they were making a board game that year that turned into a game called Frontline No Comrades. That had nothing to do with other products, but they were just like, yeah, let's sit down. You want to get a coffee? So yeah, I just went to all of them.
Forming those new connections for sure. And as somebody who is, if I tend to not be a very medieval fantasy person, so if I do just see a castle, I'm like, so I absolutely understand. I've been there. We're starting to run slightly short on time. Would you be interested to ask if people kind of asked you their questions on Twitter? Would you be in a position to kind of answer the questions?
100%. And I whatever time you have now is fine, and I'm happy to take email.
I think we'll be able to get kind of two more before we roll into the end. Also, your Twitter and my Twitter, if anybody would want to message me for whatever reason, are in the video doobly-doo below, so you'll be able to go and talk to Kwanchai that way. Taking a question from Annika Heller. How do you continue after doing first jobs with the same amazing clients? So the question is, how do you get more gigs with the same clients? Actually, this seems to be a follow-up question from the one before. So let me ask the first question of the pair, because I think that would make more sense. I have my first 2 illustrated games out this year. Congratulations. And Essen is my first outing as a published board game illustrator. Any tips for the first board game fair as officially published?
Yeah, definitely put it in your portfolio, whatever you have, and show process a little bit, because that's probably going to be your main thing. I went to my first Essen with Catacombs, and that was the only thing in my portfolio. But from that year, because I was able to, because someone's like, oh, Catacombs, I could get my foot in the door. I saw another illustrator that year, and Essen had had made a T-shirt, and had printed on their T-shirt an image of the game they'd illustrated and some other title, like literally printed a T-shirt. So when they walked up, it was on their chest. And that's very more forward than I'd want to be, but yeah, definitely use that as your first stepping stone, I would say.
Big strats, absolutely. And our last one for this evening from Marco Armbruster. How did you find your price? Which I guess is the kind of how do you calculate your rates specifically for commissions and things?
Yeah. Usually for most artists, it's going to be finding out what you want your hourly rate to be, and then expanding that across a project. So having a list of all the assets you need, how long you think it'll take, and multiplying that out. But the more complex answer is that it differs from person to person. Right now, I'm sort of chatting with some of the other tabletop illustrators in the biz who I'm lucky to know, and have talking about setting up some kind of price guide sheet, or some general thing to as a springboard to talk about pricing, because it is something that varies wildly from artist to artist, and also budgets vary wildly from publisher to publisher, and you just cannot expect the same publisher, a big one, to pay the same as a small one. So I got paid very little when I started, and I think for good reason, because my skill level was not where it is now. I wouldn't recommend it, but I had to change my pricing constantly to catch up to the kind of clients I'm working with and the kind of artist I am now. It is a changing variable thing.
Absolutely. Right. That's, man, super informative today. It's been really, really, really good. As somebody who's only been able to do the pen and ink drawings that you were showing at the start of your presentation, that is largely the limits of my ability. It's really fascinating to see how you can grow and blossom into being such cool art directions for board games and stuff. Everybody in the chat, please give a warm round of applause and a thank you to Kwanchai for the presentation.
Thank you.
While I close out the show. But thank you so much. I'm sure we will see each other again in the future. I will make it to Gen Con one year. I will make my way to the US for the first time and see all these fantastic American board game people that I know, because I would love to say hi to everybody in person.
Yeah, yes. Man, for sure.
Thank you so much.
I
accidentally cut him off there. I'm very professional. You can tell that I'm an expert. Right. Yes. And this concludes the Tabletop Mentorship Program streamer series. Yes, there we go. That is the title of the show, the Tabletop Mentorship Program streamer series. Thank you so much, all of you listening in the present, in the future, and if you're in a time traveler in the past to this and all the other presentations. Thank you so much for joining us. I'd also thank you all to having me as your guest, as your host for this season, and giving me the opportunity to meet all these fabulous, talented people and ask them questions. As I said before, you can find Kwanchai's Twitter handle in the video description below. And actually, if you would like to go and look at the series playlist as a whole, so if you would like to go and catch up on all the other videos that we've done previously, oh, thank you so much, Grace. I'm glad that I've been a host to your standards. The link that I have posted in the chat there is for this year's speaker series playlist. And then the next link that will be posted very shortly, that is appearing now, is last year's, and there's a fantastic list of all sorts of people to go over the list of the fantastic people that we've had this season. We've had Sophie Williams talking about beating imposter syndrome in one's tabletop projects, and feeling the fear and do it anyway, as the old kind of advice book said. We've had Benita Kaur on how to use your platform for good, and doing charity streams as a way to connect you and your audience with both the wider tabletop community and being able to help other people in the wider communities beyond through charity streams. We've had Faye Onyx talking about the disability pitfalls in role-playing games and how to avoid them, which was really, really insightful of somebody who is in the roles of tabletop RPGs. Finding ways to be really inclusive and diverse in the kind of games that you're designing and running, and missing those platforms is really informative. That actually comes with a big list of additional reading links, so I definitely recommend you checking that out. We had Rule Gaviola talking about how to make games colorblind friendly, which is another form of accessibility. That was also really fascinating, about taking those accessibility ideas and applying them to graphic design and not just the rules of a game. And a couple of weeks ago, we also had Bez Shariari talking about turning ideas into reality and actually getting stuff done. We're all about pragmatism and praxis in this house. And yeah, with those fascinating, and also our Kwanchai for this evening, I hope all these fantastic creators in the realms of tabletop have inspired you to push forward in your own creative exploits. We've had some people in the chat who have already released games, but maybe you're watching this and you haven't released a game yet, and you're like, one day I will get all those planets aligning and make those things happen. Well, I am here to tell you that now is the time. Now is the time. The best way to be able to be kind of good at something is to be kind of bad at something and fail a lot and try a lot of things, meet a lot of people, and expand your horizons. And I hope we have inspired you to do that today. Right. Once again, and for the final time, I have been your androgynous AI game show host from the future, Nathan Blades. This has been the Tabletop Mentorship Program Speaker Series, and I bid you all a fantastic evening. Good night. Goodbye.